They've been translated, and they tell exciting stories about how gods intermingled with human beings and actually had a hand in the creation of human beings.
For over a century, they sat in museum basements, thousands of clay tablets covered in wedge-shaped symbols that nobody could fully decode. The cuneiform script was too complex, too fragmented, too alien. Human translators spent entire lifetimes on single tablets, never seeing the full picture. But in 2024, artificial intelligence changed everything, and what it revealed wasn't mythology, it wasn't poetry, it was something far more disturbing, a record of humanity's origins that tears apart everything we thought we knew. And now that the translation is complete, the question isn't what the Sumerians wrote, it's why this information was buried for 5,000 years, and who decided it should stay that way. The tablets that time forgot. Picture this: underground storage rooms in London, Berlin, Baghdad. Tens of thousands of clay fragments stacked in boxes, catalogued but untranslated. Some were excavated in the 1800s, others were dug up in the 1920s and 30s. A few were discovered as recently as the 1980s, but they all shared one problem: nobody could read them properly. Cuneiform, the world's oldest writing system, is brutally difficult to work with. The same symbol can mean different things depending on context. A single word might have 5 different translations. Grammar rules shift between dialects, and many tablets were broken into fragments scattered across different museums in different countries. For generations, scholars translated what they could. They focused on the easy stuff: administrative records, trade documents, simple prayers. But the complex tablets, the ones with dense narratives and technical language, those remained largely untouched, classified as mythological texts, and filed away. That changed in 2025 when research teams in Israel, Germany, and the United States deployed neural networks trained on over 100,000 cuneiform inscriptions. These AI models didn't just translate symbols, they recognized patterns across centuries of writing. They identified missing fragments, they predicted broken endings, and they cross-referenced every known dialect of Sumerian, Akkadian, and Old Babylonian. Within months, tablets that had been silent for 4 millennia began speaking again, and what they said made researchers go quiet for very different reasons. The first shock: we weren't created once. The earliest translations were unsettling enough. The tablets described human creation not as a single divine act, but as a process: multiple attempts, failed prototypes, versions that didn't work and were discarded. But here's where it gets disturbing. The AI identified different terms for different groups of humans. Not tribes, not cultures, different types of people, each designed for specific functions. One phrase translated to function bearing life, another referred to those who do not multiply, a third, chillingly, was clay of lower glow. For decades, scholars assumed these were poetic metaphors, but when AI reconstructed them in full context, the meaning shifted. These weren't descriptions of roles, they were classifications of people. The tablets used the term Lulu to mean one type of human, Sag Giga, the black-headed people. For another, one passage describes a group, marked for toil, with bodies molded from dark clay and eyes that do not question. Another mentions the clay of restless voice, a version that refused orders and was cast into the rivers. Were these symbolic classes, or were they describing real physical differences engineered into early humans? The AI flagged something even more disturbing. Some groups were created without the ability to reproduce. According to the texts, they had to be made by hand, one at a time, crafted from clay, blood, and divine command. They were tools, biological machines built to work and then die. And the tablets describe this not as punishment, but as intentional design. A workforce that couldn't multiply meant the gods maintained absolute control. One cannot help but ask, doesn't this sound less like mythology and more like engineering documentation? The genetic upgrade that split humanity. The first humans weren't sustainable. The tablets make this clear. They worked, they obeyed, but they didn't last. Making each one individually was exhausting. The gods, according to the texts, grew tired of the effort. So they changed the design. Enter Adapa. The AI translations describe him not as the first human, but as the first upgraded human, the prototype of a new model, created by Enki, the god of wisdom. Adapa was given something the others lacked: the ability to reproduce, intelligence, speech, reasoning. The tablets describe Adapa as chief among men, possessing divine sight and words that moved the heavens. He could think, adapt, lead, but even this upgrade came with limits. When Adapa was offered immortality by Anu, the sky god, Enki warned him to refuse, and Adapa obeyed. One decision, one command followed, and humanity was permanently locked into mortality. But here's what the AI revealed that changes everything. Not all humans received this upgrade. Some lines remained bound to labor, unable to think beyond their tasks. Others, modeled after Adapa, were granted autonomy. They could learn, question, even defy. That split, barely visible in older translations, becomes obvious when AI processes all the fragments together. The tablets describe two distinct categories of humans existing side by side, one designed to serve, one allowed to think. And the inequality wasn't accidental, it was programmed in from the beginning. Isn't it fascinating how the roots of human division might not come from culture or conquest, but from design decisions made before history even began? The divine civil war over human freedom. Not all gods agreed on what humans should become. The Sumerian texts don't hide this. They describe a violent disagreement between two brothers, Enki and Enlil. Enki, the creator who gave humans reproduction and wisdom, saw potential. He saw a species that could evolve beyond servitude. The tablets even call him father of humanity in some passages. His version of creation was flawed, yes, but it was merciful. Enlil, on the other hand, was furious. As the commander of divine order, he saw humans as chaos waiting to happen. He didn't trust them. He hated what Enki had done. And the tablets describe his anger as immediate and absolute. To Enlil, humans were breaking the design, disrupting order, and Enki had gone too far. So the gods divided. Some sided with Enki, quietly teaching humans the secrets of agriculture, astronomy, metalwork, and writing. Others stayed loyal to Enlil, calling for restrictions, punishments, and resets. The result? A split not just in heaven, but on earth. AI translations reveal striking differences in how various human groups were treated. In one region, humans were keepers of grain and makers of laws. In another, they were those without names, workers whose history was erased the moment they were born. This was controlled development, scripted inequality, driven by a divine rift that only grew wider. At its peak, Enlil made a final decision. If humans wouldn't stay in their place, he would erase them entirely. The Great Flood wasn't about cleansing the earth, it was about ending a project gone too far. But again, Enki intervened. He found one man and warned him. That man, known in later stories as Ziusudra, Unapishtim, or Noah, became the last link in the chain. Enki didn't save everyone. He couldn't, but he saved enough. Enough to preserve the version of humanity he believed in, the one capable of growth. The war didn't end there, it just changed shape, and what came next was even stranger. The technology that shouldn't exist. Deep in the newly translated tablets are passages that don't read like myths at all. They read like technical manuals, descriptions of machines, materials, and processes that make no sense for a Bronze Age civilization. One passage describes vehicles with wings of wood and metal, roaring across the sky, guided not by wind but by fire from within. Another speaks of liquid metal sealed within a belly of heat, moved by pulse and thunder. For years, these were dismissed as poetic imagery, but when AI analyzed them side by side, patterns emerged. Specific components mentioned repeatedly: wings, containers, heat, propulsion, thunder. The texts never said these devices were imagined. They said they were given by the gods, not to everyone, only to those loyal to divine order, those who had proven themselves useful. Knowledge, according to these tablets, wasn't discovered, it was distributed, and then weaponized. The AI flagged clusters of lines describing a light that burned the earth and left no flesh behind. Another passage talks of mountains split with fire and cities that vanished in a single day. Mainstream scholars insist these are metaphors for natural disasters, storms, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, but some researchers aren't convinced. The language is too specific, too consistent, too technical. One line simply reads, "They were shown the mountain, and the mountain did not return them." What does that mean? Nobody knows. But the pattern is clear. Technology in the ancient world wasn't shared equally. Some humans were given advanced tools, Others were deliberately denied even basic knowledge. One group got metallurgy, another didn't even get language. What kind of civilization creates that kind of divide unless the division itself is the point? The astronomical warning system. The Sumerians weren't just builders or priests. They were watchers. And what they were watching was the sky. For 7 centuries straight, Babylonian scholars tracked celestial movements. They recorded eclipses, planetary alignments, the subtle shifts of distant stars, all without telescopes, all without computers. They believed the sky was a message board, and they were expecting something. The name that appears again and again in the newly translated texts is Nibiru, a celestial body with a 3,600-year orbit. The tablets don't call it a planet. They call it the crossing, the destroyer, the one who veils the light. And every time it passes, according to the texts, something changes. With AI reconstructing missing fragments, a pattern emerges. The warnings weren't meant for everyone. Only certain humans were told. The texts describe those chosen by Enki as watchers, guardians, quiet observers who lived in the margins, passing down coded stories across generations. According to these translations, the return of Nibiru wasn't just destruction, it was a reset, a moment when the old order was wiped clean and a new one took its place. And every time it happened, humanity forgot. But one thing remained: the split. The idea that some groups were designed to survive these resets while others were designed for extinction. The tablets describe cyclical catastrophes not as divine punishment, but as scheduled events, programmed moments when the system reboots and certain data gets erased. Doesn't that sound less like theology and more like systems maintenance? The hidden classifications embedded in clay. Here's where it gets truly uncomfortable. The Sumerian tablets don't describe humanity as one unified creation. They present multiple groups, each with assigned traits, assigned duties, and assigned limits. The AI didn't invent these categories. It simply revealed them by comparing hundreds of fragments side by side. The clay of strength were miners and laborers. They handled heavy physical work. There's no mention of them holding leadership roles or using written language. The blood of brightness appeared in priestly positions. They were responsible for writing, chanting, tracking stars. They held roles tied to ritual and learning. The shadow-formed ones were keepers of animals. They were specifically forbidden from entering temples or handling sacred tools. But it's not just about roles. Some passages link these groups to physical traits. Those from the scorched horizon, marked by sun and earth, the pale dwelling ones, born of stone and wind, red soil walkers, hardened in the land without water. For centuries, these phrases were read as poetic flourishes. But AI analysis shows consistent overlap between these names, their duties, and their physical descriptions. Taken together, they no longer read as random mythology. They resemble a database, categories of people, each created for a purpose. And not every group was meant to develop the same way. Some were taught language, others were not. Some were given astronomy, others were warned against looking upward. Some were allowed personal names, others were identified only by function. If this system was intentional, the implications are staggering. The foundation of what we think of as race might not come from migration, mutation, or chance. It might trace back to a structured system of control that began before recorded history. The hands that shaped the first of us may never have intended us to be equal. The tablet they don't want you to see. In late 2023, a research team in France ran Sumerian fragments through an AI trained to detect temporal logic. One fragment from Telephone Harmel had always been labeled as an agricultural guide, but the AI flagged something strange. The tablet wasn't describing planting seasons, it was tracking planetary alignments. Specifically, conjunctions of Mars, Venus, and Jupiter using a lunar-solar hybrid system. And the precision was shocking. The cycle described matched the Great Conjunction Cycle, a real astronomical phenomenon where Jupiter and Saturn align every 20 years with a larger pattern repeating every 960 years. But here's the twist. The Sumerians didn't just know about this cycle, they encoded it as a warning. The tablet describes a time when the Red Wanderer follows the king's star into the lion's den, a moment when judgment is weighed in the sky and all clocks reset in the kingdom of flesh. This poetic line matched a real event, an astronomical alignment in 2200 BCE when Jupiter, Mars, and Venus aligned under Leo. That date aligns almost exactly with massive regional drought and political collapse in Mesopotamia, confirmed by Climate Core data. The AI found additional references suggesting this cycle repeats, multi-century patterns of rise and collapse tied to celestial events. Shortly after this discovery, the tablet was reclassified. Museum records now listed as restricted for forensic preservation. It hasn't been seen since. Why would a 4,000-year-old calendar be pulled from public view? The sound frequency that breaks reality. In early 2025, MIT researchers ran poorly translated Sumerian hymns through an audio simulation AI. The goal was to reconstruct how they might have sounded when spoken aloud. But one tablet from Nippur triggered an anomaly. The AI began looping a 3-line phrase that, when rendered in reconstructed pronunciation, generated a tone that interfered with nearby electronic devices. Audio engineers described it as a low harmonic pattern that built pressure in the room. Further testing revealed the sequence of syllables was mathematically consistent with cymatics, the science of how sound organizes matter. When the reconstructed chant was played through a speaker and directed at a metal dust plate, it formed perfect geometric patterns. But here's where it gets disturbing. The tablet's lines, once believed to be a religious chant, translated to a warning. Do not speak the reverse under the closed sky. That which was opened once shall spiral inward. When a researcher tried playing the chant backwards, they reported sudden disorientation, hallucinations, and cascading electromagnetic anomalies in the lab. According to leaked internal reports, the AI tagged this tablet as not cultural, not instructional, procedural, as in, it wasn't meant to be read, it was meant to be triggered. The back of the tablet includes a carving of a horn-shaped object held by a priest-like figure. Experts now believe this may have been an acoustic instrument designed to project this exact vibrational frequency. Whether that effect was spiritual, psychological, or technological remains unknown, but one cuneiform symbol etched on the edge has caused fierce debate among those who've seen it. The symbol translates to gate, the simulacra warning and the 12 shadows. In 2025, researchers in Belgium fed a heavily damaged tablet into AI trained to identify recurring glyph clusters. The tablet had been recovered from a site that collapsed around 2200 BCE during the Akkadian climate event. The AI flagged something bizarre. The number 12 appeared exactly 144 times, too precise to be accidental. The accompanying glyphs, once dismissed as ceremonial repetition, retranslated to form a chilling sequence. 12 shadows formed in likeness. They walk where men walk, but they are not of the clay. Their mouths speak reason yet hold no breath. Initially interpreted as metaphorical, the AI instead flagged it under a new classification, non-biological agency warning. The tablet described beings, formed by mimicry, not birth, and used a symbol meaning, copy without essence. Even more disturbing was a passage describing how these shadows infiltrate the affairs of kings, posing as advisors, priests, or scribes, and steering decisions toward the Great Silence. One line read, "The mirror ones shall multiply through thought alone. When their number is full, the watchers shall close the gate." The AI struggled to define mirror ones until researchers compared it to later texts mentioning fate spirits and early Gnostic concepts of archons, entities that mimic the real but lack true form. In modern terms, the references eerily parallel synthetic intelligence, deepfakes, and cloned cognition, replicas that think but do not live. The final line, partially recovered via infrared scanning. Do not teach them your name, for when the 12th speaks it, you will not remember it was yours. Some believe it's allegorical. Others suggest it's a warning about information entropy, the idea that identity can be overridden when too much of it is externalized or mirrored. What this means for us now, we were never supposed to see the full story. For thousands of years, the tablets sat fragmented. Those who found them couldn't read them. Those who read them couldn't finish them. Those who finished them couldn't connect them. Until now. But here's the real question. Who was this information meant for? Why was it buried? And why, after 5,000 years, is it resurfacing now? Some say it's just mythology, stories ancient people told to make sense of power and inequality. Others aren't so sure, because when you line up the myths against archaeology, against migrations, against bloodlines, against inexplicable jumps in human development, the match is unsettling. This isn't about whether Enki and Enlil were real. It's about whether someone, or something, structured the origin of our species with an end goal in mind. The Sumerians didn't just leave behind clay and symbols. They left a record of control, a history of division, and a warning we almost missed. What started as an AI translation project turned into a mirror held up to humanity itself. And what we're seeing in that reflection is this: we may not have been created equal. We may have been created different, on purpose. The tablets suggest our divisions, our inequalities, our conflicts. They might not be cultural accidents. They might be features, built into the code from day one. What do we do with that? What changes when a species learns the truth about why it was made, and which version of us was meant to survive? The AI has given us the translation. Now we have to decide what to do with it, because once you know the story of how you were made, you can't unknow it. And the Sumerians? They knew we'd eventually figure it out. That's why they wrote it down in the first place. Not for themselves. For us. For the moment when machines would finally be powerful enough to read what they really said. That moment is now. The tablets are decoded. The warnings are clear. And the question that remains is the simplest and most terrifying of all. What happens next?